From the beginning of human history, we have been storytellers, created to tell stories and to be moved by them. And for thousands of years, much of that storytelling took place around a fire. From passing on tales of heroes in history to deep spiritual gospel-centered conversations. And there is still something about a fire that draws us in. The glow, the warmth, the comforting crackle. Clearing your mind of distractions so that you can really listen. The Bible is full of wild and incredible stories where the spiritual and physical worlds meet. Sometimes, because these stories are so unconventional or unfamiliar, it's easy to forget that they're real historical events with real people. A time where God interrupted normal expectations to display His power, His holiness, and His grace. 9 summer Sundays, 9 biblical events to explore that will challenge us and encourage us to see how God often works in awe-inspiring ways. So pull up a chair and join us around the fire as we get started.
Well, good morning, Getwell Church. It's an honor and privilege to be with you today. My name is Greg Meek. I am pastor to Next Gen and Families here at the South Haven campus, and I'm excited about our message today, particularly the story that we're going to be working in this series called Around the Campfire. Today we will be focusing in the book of 2 Kings, particularly in chapter 6. Now, there are moments in our life where we cannot seem to see the whole story, but we think we do. We think we know the whole story. And if we're not careful, we let what's in our mind actually define what we think is the truth. Some examples. You get a diagnosis and it feels like it's the end of the story. You get an email from your boss and it feels like that your future is narrowed down to just a hallway with a door at the end. You get a phone call about a child and the conversation with your spouse, or the bill that you can't pay, the temptation you didn't expect, and suddenly the visible becomes very loud. It becomes very immediate, and it becomes very convincing. And that's exactly where we're going to find ourselves in this story, and this is where this story today will meet us. I love these Old Testament stories because, they're stories that we just kind of gloss over. Maybe we don't understand them, but when we're forced to sit and wrestle with them, and I've had to do a lot of wrestling with this story this week because it helps us to see so much of how God is working in and through us and the world around us. Now, this story in 2 Kings is a story about war. But it's not just the kind of war that are with animals and horses and chariots. There's also a story here, there's a spiritual warfare element into this story. It's always in spiritual warfare, there's a conflict that's going on that we can't see, but we can certainly feel. It's about there's a reality that there's more is happening around us than what's really in front of us. And the question we have in this story is not whether we have an enemy. We do have an enemy. He's an enemy of God and he's an enemy of us. And it is Satan and his evil forces. But the question here is whether we will live as though God is actually present in that battle. And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Now, when we talk spiritual warfare, I know Jonathan talked about it a lot last week in his story as well. But when we talk about this term spiritual warfare, some people immediately get really uncomfortable with this because to our modern Western world, this just sounds too dramatic. Our Western mindset and our scientific world that we live in tells us that this can't be real. Some people get curious about this, though, because they have experienced enough in life to know that there are enough forces at work that don't seem to fit into our modern world. But before we go any further, let me just say this very plainly. Spiritual warfare is not the church's excuse for everything. It's not a scare tactic. But here's what it is. It is a biblical explanation for why life is often harder, why it's often heavier, and it's often more contested than it ever should be. And this passage that we're going to be in gives us a narrative to really help us see this clearly today. Now, to set this up, we find that the story takes place roughly around in the 840s BC period. This was after the kingdom of Israel had split into two. You had the northern kingdom of Israel that they called the northern kingdom of Israel, and the southern kingdom was called the kingdom of Judah. This passage takes place around the time or during the time of Elisha's ministry, and Elisha was a successor to Elijah. And we see during this time, there's some terms in here that we really get confused over, but the northern kingdom had a capital that was called Samaria because it was in that region of Israel. The southern kingdom's capital, of course, was Jerusalem. The area that is in conflict with this northern kingdom of Israel in those days was called Aram Damascus, and we would understand that to be Syria today. Now, I'm going to say this. Somebody came up to me after church and even before the first service, because we're going to be talking about the Assyrians today. And their phone started beeping because I said Siri. And that's a true story. So I don't know what you do with your phones. If your phone starts going off, I'm not calling Siri, but I'm talking about Assyria, the country. But anyway, this story today, it depicts a repeated Aramean raiding parties that are constantly coming against that northern kingdom in ambush on the Israelite territory. And what I want us to do, I want us to read this passage all together before we start breaking it down, because I think it tells a more complete narrative if we do it that way. So let's start in 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning in verse 8. Once when the king of Syria was warring against Israel, he took counsel with his servants, saying, "At such and such a place shall be my camp." But the man of God, and anytime you see this here, the man of God is talking about Elisha. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, "Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are going down there." And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God told him. Thus he used to warn him, so that he saved himself there more than once or twice. And the mind of the king of Syria was greatly troubled because of this thing. And he called his servants and said to them, "Will you not show me who of us is for the king of Israel?" And one of his servants said, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel. He tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." And he said, "Go and see where he is, that I may send and seize him." It was told him, "Behold, he is in Dothan." So he sent their horses and chariots and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" And he said, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Then Elisha prayed and said, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And when the Syrians came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Please strike this people with blindness." So he struck them with blindness in accord with the prayer of Elisha. And Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek." And he led them to Samaria. And as soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha said, "O Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see." So the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. As soon as the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elijah, "My father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down?" He answered, "You shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those whom you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them that they may eat and drink and go to their master." So he prepared for them a great feast, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And the Syrians did not come again on raids into the land of Israel. That's an amazing story. We see this king of Syria here. He's making war, doing raids against Israel and the northern kingdom. And every time he plans to attack, somehow Elisha knows. I mean, it's almost funny, except if you were for the king of Syria, right? He keeps losing his advantage, and he keeps missing the ambush. He keeps wondering, all right, who is leaking this information? There's no spy in the room, though, but there's a prophet in the nation. And that prophet is Elijah that God sent. And Elijah keeps warning the king of Israel, don't go there. The Syrians are setting a trap. And time after time after time, Israel avoids the danger. Now think about what that means. The enemy has a plan, and God knows the plan. And God is already and was already ahead of that plan. Now that's a word that somebody here needs today. See, the enemy is not original. We know who the enemy is. It's Satan and it's all his forces. He is strategic. He is persistent. And he is absolutely deceptive. But he's not God. He's not sovereign. He does not get the final say, and he doesn't get to write the last chapter. He doesn't even get to know all the details that God is working with. Now, in this text, the Syrian king determines that Elisha is the problem. So what does he want to do? He sends horses, chariots, and a great army to surround the city of Dothan, where he's been told that Elisha is, by night. And he just doesn't want to capture Elisha. He wants to eliminate him. He wants to eliminate this interference. But here's where the story becomes really painfully relatable to all of us. The servant of Elisha gets up. He walks outside and he sees all the chariots and the armies surrounding and the enemy everywhere. And what does he think? There's no escape. There's no backup plan. There's no exit strategy here. And I love his response because it sounds so many like us at times, doesn't it? He says, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" In other words, this is worse than I thought. So much worse. We're outnumbered, we're trapped, we're done for. So I ask you, have you ever been there? Not necessarily with actual soldiers around your house, but with many things in life, with anxiety all in your chest, with fear in your mind, with a problem in your family that keeps circling, with a temptation that keeps kicking back in, with a grief that won't leave, with a child that's making choices that you don't know how to stop. Maybe it's a marriage that feels under siege, or financial pressure that's sitting on your shoulders the minute you open your eyes in the morning. But see, that servant looked around and he made a very human conclusion. What I see is all there is. What I see is all there is. And see, this is where spiritual warfare gets real, church. Because one of the enemy's greatest tactics is not to just attack you, but to convince you that what you see is the only thing that's there and the only thing that matters. If he can get you to believe that, he doesn't have to win the battle. He just has to win the interpretation of the battle. But then we see here that Elisha then says something that sounds really impossible, doesn't he? He says, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Notice what he does not say. He does not say there's no army. He does not say you're imagining things. He does not say this is all going to be easy. He says, you are not seeing everything. See, that's a different kind of confidence that Elisha has in God. It's not denial. It's not hype. It's not fake positivity. It's just a settled belief that what the visible world is showing is not the whole world. So what is the first thing that Elisha do? He prays. Elisha prays, and this is one of the most important prayers in this whole passage. He says, "O Lord, please open his eyes," the servant's eyes, "that he may see." And what happened? The Lord opened the eyes, and what does the servant see? Suddenly he sees that the whole mountainside is full of what? Horses and chariots of fire that are all surrounding Elisha. There's an army there for him. Now let's pause right here. This is not just a cool Bible story. This is a window into how God works in the middle of fear. It's a window. Because see, sometimes the first miracle you need is not a change in circumstances. Sometimes the first miracle that you need is a change of perspective. Because if God only changes your situation but leaves your perception untouched, you may still live like a defeated person inside of a victorious moment. Elijah doesn't pray for the enemy to leave. He prays for the eyes to be open. And this is a powerful lesson for us, church, because so much of our stress comes from what we cannot see clearly. Go through the situations. We see the bills, but not the provision. We see the conflict, but not the future reconciliation. We see the diagnosis, but not the doctor who is still present. We see the teenager pulling away, but not the God who can reach a heart, unlike a parent can reach alone. We see the relapse. We see the setbacks, the fear, the loneliness, the pressure, the temptation. We could run through that list, but what we do not always see is what God has already positioned around us. Now let's be careful here. This is not a promise that if you pray hard enough, you're always going to get a dramatic vision of invisible armies. This is not even the point. The point is this: God is always more present than your fears allow you to believe. God is always more present than your fears allow you to believe. Parents, you are not parenting alone. When you pray over your children, you're just not speaking into thin air. You're asking God to do what you cannot do. You can guide, you can model, you can set boundaries, you can have the hard conversation, but it is only God that can open eyes and change hearts. For the single adult, this means your life is not on pause while you wait for the next season. You're not stuck in spiritual limbo. God is at work in your life, in your singleness, in your habits, in your friendships, in your integrity, in your calling. And the enemy would love for you to think that you are behind, that you're overlooked, or you're incomplete. But God is not late and you are not forgotten. Workers in all of our workplaces, our workplace is so much more than a place of deadlines and personalities and emails. It's a place where our character is tested, where peace can be practiced, where integrity can shine, and where you either live as you are surrounded by pressure or you're surrounded by God's presence. For the one here that may be carrying secret shame, this means the battle is not proof that God has abandoned you. The battle may be the very place where God wants to reveal His power in your weakness. And church, the whole church, this means we cannot afford to be a people who only read the visible headlines. We have got to have spiritual eyes. Because sometimes the problem is, it's not that God is absent. The problem is we're blind to what He's doing. And that's why prayer matters so much. Prayer is not a religious ritual we do to calm ourselves down. And it's not that. It's how we align our hearts with the reality. Prayer says, God, show me what I cannot see. Show me what I cannot see. Help me interpret this moment through your presence, not my panic. Imagine how different our lives would be if we prayed every day, Lord, open my eyes to show me what you are doing. What would our marriage be like if instead of saying you never listen or you never change, you prayed, Lord, open my eyes to show me what you're doing in my spouse and open my spouse's eyes to see what you're doing in me? How different would your parenting be if instead of only saying, I have such a rebellious child, you prayed, Lord, open my eyes to see beyond the behavior and into the battle? Imagine how different anxiety would be if instead of every day rehearsing every single possible outcome in fear, you said, Lord, open my eyes to see that you are already in the future that I'm afraid of. And here's the beauty of this story. This story takes a really strange turn. The Syrians come down to Elijah, right? And Elijah then prays that God would strike them with blindness, and God does that. Now that sounds very harsh until we realize something important. It's the very people who came to blind the prophet are now the ones that are blinded. The ones who thought they were in control are not in control at all. They're being led by a hand without realizing it. And Elijah says, this is not the way, this is not the city. Follow me and I will lead you to the man whom you seek. And here he is right there. They can't see him. And he takes them where? Into northern Israel, into the capital of Samaria. And then once they're in that middle of Samaria, he prays again, Lord, open their eyes. And now they're in the truth. They're surrounded. But not by a foreign army, but the people that they came to attack. And there's deep irony here. The enemy thought that they had trapped Elijah. Instead, he walked into a trap of his own making. And see, this is how spiritual warfare works. Sin promises control, but delivers captivity. Lies promise freedom, but create bondage. Bitterness promises protection, but it poisons the soul. Pride promises strength, but produces vulnerability. Fear promises caution, and slowly that fear shrinks your life until you can barely breathe. And the devil's favorite and his force's favorite weapon is blindness. Not necessarily physical blindness, but spiritual blindness. He wants you to misread what is going on, what is really happening. He wants you to believe that your emotions are facts. He wants you to trust your fears more than your Father. He wants you to think that the temptation is harmless, that the compromise that you're willing to do is small and the resentment is justified and that the prayer doesn't matter. And if He can blind you long enough, He can move you where He wants you and you don't even realize it. So this is why we have to answer and ask ourselves hard questions of ourselves. This is what we have to ask. What have I been calling just stress that actually may be spiritual pressure? What have I been calling just a personality issue that might actually be a battle over peace and unity? What have I been calling, and we say this all the time, I'm just the way I am. What if that might be an area where God wants to bring freedom for you? What if I've been calling what's just a rough season? That's a moment to stand more intentionally in prayer, in truth, and obedience. Here's the truth, church. Here's our truth. If we misdiagnose the battle, you're going to use the wrong tools. If we misdiagnose the battle, you're going to use the wrong tools. If you think everything is just psychological, you will probably never pray. If you think everything, though, is just spiritual, you're probably never going to take practical action. See, wisdom says this: God, show me the real battle so I can respond the right way. And here's that part of the story that's really astonishing. The king of Israel sees the army trapped, and what is his first instinct is to do what? It's to destroy. He asked this, my father, shall I strike them down? He asked it twice, shall I strike them down? And that's our natural human response, isn't it? They came for us, let's get back at them. They deserve it, let's end this now. And Elisha says no. Instead, he tells the king of Israel to set bread and water before them so they may eat and drink and go on back to their home, their master. And the king does this. He prepares a great feast, and then it's amazing. This problem is solved. The scripture says, then the Syrians go home and the raids stop. Imagine that. This is stunning in this culture. The man of God, wins this battle not through revenge, but through mercy. Church, that's not weakness. That is strength under control. Because one of the ways that we know that we are really seeing clearly is when we stop trying to destroy everyone who opposes us. Let me say it this way. Spiritual warfare does not give us permission to become cruel. In fact, the clearer we see the battle, the more compassionate that we should even be towards the people that are caught in this. There are people who hurt you because they're hurt. These are people who attack you because they're afraid. These are people who try to control everything because in their past they could never control their own circumstances. These are people who lash out at you because they are spiritually blinded. And this doesn't excuse everything. We're not looking for an excuse, but it does show where the responsibility is. It does remind us that our battle is much deeper than personalities and preferences. And in this world, even politics. Sometimes the person in front of you is not the real enemy. Sometimes they're the casualty of a much deeper conflict. And if we could just realize this, it should change all of our reactions. It changes how we speak to our spouse. It changes how we react to a coworker. It changes how we engage a child that's acting out. It changes how you handle conflict anywhere, in the church, in the workplace, in your neighborhood, in your family, in your friend group. Because when we see this bigger picture, you just don't ask, how do I win? You ask, how do I reflect the heart of God in the middle of this? And the heart of God is more merciful than most of the time we're comfortable with. So here's what we ask ourselves. What do we do with this? How do we apply it? What does this passage mean for us? Here's the first thing. We don't assume the visible is the final reality, because it's not. Some of us need to hear this today because we've been living as if the visible facts are the final facts, and they are not. See, the marriage may be strained, but that's not the final word. The teenager may be drifting, but that's not the final word. The job may be a mess and unstable, but that's not the final word. The temptation may be persistent. The loneliness may be deep. The doctor may have said what the doctor said. That's not the final word. The story is bigger than the scene that is in front of you. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean God is not there. Just because you can't trace His hand doesn't mean He's not moving. Just because the enemy suddenly just seemingly looks so strong does not mean he is the one in charge. But here's what we have to do. We have to do this. We have to pray for sight before you pray for escape. Pray for sight. And this is huge for a lot of us. Because what do? We usually say, God, just change my circumstances. But maybe the first prayer should be, God, change how I see these circumstances. Because when God changes how you see, He changes how you stand. So today, don't ask God just for the escape. Ask Him for sight. Don't ask Him to remove the pressure. Ask Him to reveal His presence in that pressure. Don't ask Him to make life easier. Ask Him to make you faithful in the middle of this battle of life that we have. Because when your eyes are open, you begin to live differently. You pray differently. You forgive differently. You wait differently. You lead differently. You parent differently. You work differently. And we even suffer differently. This is huge for today's culture. Refuse to let fear shape your circumstances. Elisha didn't panic. Why? Because he knew who was with him. He knew who was with him. He didn't panic because he had seen enough of God's faithfulness over and over to trust Him again and again. And this is a challenge for all of us. Fear and anxiety are probably the two greatest issues I meet with people about, particularly young people. It's an epidemic we have in our world today. And it's choking you guys. Parents, when you're anxious about your children, don't let fear become your loudest counselor. Singles, when you're tempted to settle for less because you feel behind, don't let fear write your future. People in the workplace, when you're under that pressure of high anxiety and high stress, integrity is what we need to look for. Don't let fear tell you to compromise. Students, everyone around you seems to have an easier life than you. It's not true. Don't let fear convince you of that, and don't let fear convince you that God has forgotten you. And then what we have to do is this. We have to refuse to let revenge shape your response. Don't fight the wrong battle, because not every problem is solved by winning an argument. Hint, hint, social media. Not every tension is solved by getting even. And not every fear is solved by more information. Because here, sometimes the battle is for your peace, your integrity, your hope, your trust, your obedience. And the weapon that we should use is prayer, truth, patience, forgiveness, steadfastness. Remember, we should practice mercy. Now, even when we stand firm, there's a kind of strength that knows how to protect without becoming hostile. It's a strength that knows how to be honest without being harsh, how to set boundaries without losing compassion. Because here's the deal, God's not asking us to be the hero in this story. Elisha never runs around in this message trying to prove how powerful he is. He simply trusts God, prays with confidence, and he responds with wisdom. And that's our invitation too. You do not have to be the strongest person in the room. You do not have to have the perfect answer. You do not have to control every outcome. You do not have to panic every time you feel surrounded. Because if God is with you, and He is, you are never outnumbered in the way that fear tells you to believe. Maybe today you are like that servant that walks out that morning and you see the army. You see what you're facing, and you're thinking, "This is it. I'm done. We're finished." And maybe the word that you need from this passage is not try harder. Maybe it's open your eyes. Open your eyes to the fact that the God of the universe is nearer to you than you think. Open your eyes to the fact that the battle is bigger than the visible moment that's in front of you. Open your eyes to the fact that fear is a poor interpreter of reality. Open your eyes to the fact that mercy is stronger than revenge. And open your eyes to the fact that your life is being held together by more than your own strength. And if you're here today and you've been living like the army outside the city is the final word, I want to encourage you, it's not the final word. God is still God. He still sees, He still leads, He still protects, He still opens eyes, He still prepares feast in the middle of conflict, He still brings peace where there is fear. In a moment, you guys are going to have the opportunity to bring whatever it is you're dealing with to these prayer rails, and I encourage you to do it. Because I talk to you guys, I counsel some of you. There's a lot of stuff you're dealing with. Fear, anxiety, worry, whatever. Make the list. Church, let's come here and let's pray like Elijah prayed. "Oh Lord, open my eyes. Open my eyes." Because when God opens your eyes, you begin to see what was there all along, that you're not abandoned, that you're not forgotten, and you are certainly not fighting this battle alone.